Buzz. Von Ornsteiner is a forensic psychologist and a frequent guest here as well. Dr. Buzz, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, Dr. Buzz, if this was an attack, this grandmother attacks this mother in front of the mother's children or the grandmother's own kids that she brought along with her friends and other people in line, what do you think's going on with her? I mean, just because somebody's allowed to go in front of her in the line, she attacks her with fists and with her feet?
Right. No, it's age-inappropriate behavior. And of course,
I'll say.
Yes, as a public, of course, we tend to thrive on this stuff because we don't usually lose it. And we sometimes focus in on people who do because we live vicariously with people who actually engage in these acting out behaviors. They somehow cannot control their rage. They haven't learned coping skills, or they're triggered by things that happen. One of the things that strikes me is that she seemed to be triggered by seeing Aimee Krause go ahead of her.
Yeah.
And so somehow that makes Aimee Krause the bad person because we're somehow in this race to get to the head of the line. Logical reasoning would tell us, well, who's in charge here? Aimee Krause isn't in charge. Why don't you go to the attendant?
Right.
Why, take all your anger, all this venom, and then attack this person as if they're the instigator, they're the ones that you need to blame for this horrible catastrophe that's making you so angry. Sounds like Miss Walker was ruminating in line. It sounds like she was perseverating. It sounds like she doesn't do well with waiting.
Perseverating?
Yes, she was just sitting in line. Perseverating just means that you're groomed kind of towards anger. You don't have anything to think about. There's no redirection. And all you are doing is just kind of sitting in line, waiting and waiting and waiting.
That's why I love having you on, Dr. Buzz. I learned new words. I'm going to write that one down, perseverating.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Buzz, it's true what Carmen says, though. Waiting in lines, whether it's at a ski resort or any kind of an amusement park, it is very frustrating. I think it's a testament to how much we love our children that we take them to these amusement parks where you spend about 95% of your time waiting in line for the 2-minute thrill. I think this actual ride is about 1.5 minutes long, and you're just waiting and waiting. You have the kids, and they get cranky, and they get tired, they get hungry, thirsty, they gotta go to the bathroom, and you gotta stay there in that darn line. I mean, it is very frustrating.
It is, and we do cut children a lot of slack because they're young and they're little and they don't have insight and they don't have wisdom and they don't have mature coping skills.
Are you saying adults have those?
Well, we want to believe adults do, and we're a lot more tougher on adults when they have these acting out age-inappropriate behaviors. Sounds like Mrs. Walker has limited coping skills. It sounds like Mrs. Walker doesn't have great insight when it comes to negotiation skills. Sounds like she probably flies off the handle a great deal. And I know she has one incident with the police in her background, chasing a woman with a gun who she says was sleeping with her husband. But we don't know about every detail in her life. And I tend to think people with poor anger management skills have a pervasive problem within their life. She probably has a problem with people that she works with. She probably has a problem with her mother, her children. I tend to look at these things not as isolated instances, but pervasive in those individuals' lives.
I feel sorry for Victoria Walker if she's gone through all the trouble of losing 50 or 60 pounds and her minister thinks she's gained weight.
Right. No, one fascinating element about this whole trial is we see how people's memories are skewed based on the emotional reaction to what happened. Emotions really do skew our memory, and what we think happened can oftentimes be very skewed because we take such an emotional reaction to what is going on. It's interesting that the defendant, Miss Walker's group, tends to minimize everything. Oh, it was nothing. It just kind of happened. It was over just like that. Whereas we look at Mrs. Krause's group, it was very, very traumatic.
I think you're right, and people can be telling the truth from their own point of view, and yet the stories are very, very different. So, Dr. Buzz, as we look at the psychological issues here, we've got battling psychologists as to whether she has long-term cognitive impairment. How do we get to the bottom of that?
It's really hard. You're always going to get psychologists who have a difference of opinion, just like dentists and psychiatrists and medical doctors. You're going by patient testimony. You're going by an individual who may overly dramatize what's happened to them. You may be working with an individual who says, all this happened because of what happened to me at this time. They're always looking for reasons. We're always looking for explanations. We kind of have to go with how much the individual may be ruled, again, by their emotion and tend to embellish, exaggerate, and heighten what happened to them and say, now, look, I have all these problems and it's due to this.
Yeah, especially because she's got a civil suit pending against Disney World. Oh, I wouldn't want to have to cross-examine Aunt Bessie. Would not want to have to do that. Dr. Buzz, one of the issues in this case is the cursing. We hear allegations that one of these women was cursing in line in front of the children, using the F word. This was very upsetting. You know, it does seem really out of place in line at Disney World. It's just filled with little kids.
Absolutely, totally inappropriate behavior. And in that situation, I lose any kind of empathy. Regardless of what happens, if you can't control your own reactions and you can't retain a level of being emotionally calm, then you really need to get treatment. Because if you're swearing, you have diarrhea of the mouth, and you're just saying all these obscenities, you need to see someone and learn to control your anger. The other area that seems to kind of puzzle me is you're looking at one side versus the other side. It's like watching the Hatfields and the McCoys, or our I Love Lucy with the Ricardos and the Mertz. They get into trouble with each other, and every side becomes more embellished, and there's more miscommunication and more mismemory until it's one side against the other, and you don't know who to believe because everything seems to be overly dramatized.
You know, Dr. Buzz, I think you're right, and the jury does not know, but there were some witnesses who were heard outside the presence of the jury. The judge decided not to let them testify, but they were going to say that Krause, the alleged victim here, had a history of aggressive behavior with other parents, that she threatened to push a teacher against a chalkboard, that she followed another parent in the car. So this sounds like a perfect storm of two Barracuda moms butting up against each other in line at Disney World.
No, you're absolutely right, and the unfortunate thing is, with age, we always want to believe there's wisdom, but not in this case. It sounds like there's no internal mechanism that stops them from getting into these outrageous, overreactive, and counterproductive behaviors.
On the other hand, Dr. Buzz, only one person has injuries here. If this was really a fight between two women, how come only one person has injuries?
No. Absolutely, great point. All I keep hearing about is the pulling of the hair, and I don't care if Miss Walker was elbowed, and I don't care if something triggered in her emotion and those persons that she was mad at cut in front of her in line. That doesn't excuse this kind of abuse. There's never any excuse for this kind of abuse. And then all I keep hearing is, well, everybody's in agreement that there was this hair pulling, so it's really bad.
Yeah. I don't like hair pulling, though. That might provoke me. And so, Dr. Buzz, you know, this almost seems surreal. Listening to these attacks on the teacups. There's all the kids around, and this is a church youth group, and they're at Disneyland, for crying out loud. And they got into the front of the line. They're just about to have that fun that they've been waiting for so long. I guess this goes to show that you can lose your mind, you can lose your temper just about anywhere. Absolutely.
You know, life is always going to be filled with frustrations, and you can't control always the environments you find yourself in or people's unpredictable behaviors, but you can learn to emotionally control how you react to it. With insight, mature growth, a memory of what happened before based on consequences, and also getting with the point where you want to say, hey, take a breather, use your sense of humor, go with the flow, and try to remain emotionally calm. These people, both these people I might add, look like they need anger management classes.
Yeah, do those classes really work?
They can if the person is highly motivated to get control over their emotional instability. You've got to be motivated to change.
I think Dr. Buzz is right. Like, you have to want to change, right? Isn't that what the psychologists always tell us, Dr. Buzz? You got to want to change. If you go into those classes with the attitude that I've got a problem, I want to change, perhaps you can.
Absolutely. You know, we all can have a short fuse, and there are people in this world who tend to be more hot-headed than others. But if you have an anger management problem, you've got to change, you've got to adapt, or else you're a burden to everyone that's involved with you.
Yeah. Well, big thanks to our guest, Dr. Buzz von Ornsteiner, for joining us this morning.